real briefly, because the intent isn't to cover this, but
Sure.
just how are you dealing with your kind of experience with Parkinson's disease?
Yeah.
How did you end up on Team Synapse?
Okay. First part, I know many people treat living with Parkinson's as a fight. I don't. I feel like, or I know that Parkinson's symptoms are accentuated with stress. And if you're in a fight, almost by definition, you're stressed. And I don't think I'm going to win against my disease with Parkinson's. I don't think it's a fight I'm going to win. So I, particularly with the stress induced aspects of Parkinson's when you're under stress, in that light, I'm built more to live with stuff as well as I can. So I view Parkinson's not as a fight, and I do not begrudge the people that do view it as a fight because people need that resolve, and that's a beautiful thing. So I don't want to suggest that that's a bad thing. I think it's a great thing. But for me, I don't really look at it as a fight. I look at it as living with the disease as best I can, and that doesn't mean living alone, thank God. You know, we don't want others to have Parkinson's, but since others do, it's wonderful when we're in community. And Team Synapse invited that opportunity to be part of a community with you, Bill, and with Peter, and with Joe, people I knew. And then you all introduced us to people we didn't know. And that was, to me, the most beautiful part of that weekend. Yeah.
How do you reconcile those differences and the changes that you're seeing from an athletic ability and stay so positive?
Well, I wasn't always positive with golf. Let's take that as a manifestation of how you live with Parkinson's. That's a sport that I've always enjoyed and maybe even loved. And for some years, I played it very well. And when undiagnosed Parkinson's came along, I began to play the game poorly. I couldn't coordinate my meeting the golf ball. And golf is a particularly, I think, challenging sport for people with a neurodegenerative disease like Parkinson's because it requires a great deal of precision, maybe more than other sports. So I didn't know that that was at work, and that was frustrating when there was no understanding that I had Parkinson's, and yet I was missing the ball completely or hitting the ball very differently than I was used to. And there's so many more important things than golf, but that wasn't an activity I enjoyed, and so that was puzzling. And then when I got diagnosed, it kind of gave me an identification of what the problem was and how to live with it. And frankly, medicine helped with coordination, so that was helpful. And then I figured, hey, there's a way to enjoy this game that's untraditional, that's unconventional. And for me, that was using a tee everywhere, so it didn't put quite as exacting precision on hitting a golf ball. I have yet to figure out how to hit a ball out of a sand trap, so I don't hit out of a sand trap. I just give myself a free drop. I learned that I could putt one-handed better than I could putt two-handed. I learned that I could play lefty from inside of certain yardage better than I could play righty, and all that came from trial and error and experimentation and saying, okay, there's another way to play this game. And that's the key, I think, and that's one reason we've launched Parkinson's Players. It's embracing play. And, we know exercise is vital for our disease and slowing the progression. For me, I said, okay, exercise is one thing, and I do enjoy exercise, whether it's play or not, but I particularly enjoy play-based exercise. And that is a godsend for this disease because it means we're active and it means we're having fun, usually, if you're playing. So playing golf was the emphasis was more on the play than the golf. Golf was fun to do, but it was playing. I didn't want to lose sight that this is supposed to be fun, and I just had to find a different way to find that fun and stay in concert with friends who like the game too.
What drives you to keep trying?
Well, I think it's a realization that there's more than one way to accomplish something, more than one way towards a goal. There's a straight path. I mean, even for those that aren't, saddled with a disease, there's probably not a straight path in life. I mean, you're going to take turns, you're going to find different avenues. And I think I knew that intuitively that, okay, there's the way I used to play golf or tennis or run or do a marathon or, I've learned I really can't do it that way anymore. So that didn't mean there wasn't another way. And I think there's always another way. And in sports or in these activities like those, I just, maybe like us all, I fooled around with different ways to approach things and discovered, hey, there's a way to enjoy this. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not driven towards a goal. In my professional career, of course, there was a lot of goal orientation with what we do in our professional lives, and maybe there is in our personal lives too. And I have been goal oriented throughout my life. With this disease, I haven't put the emphasis so much on goal, although that's there. I put the emphasis more on where am I going to find enjoyment in life? There's enough to be concerned about in life, and let's embrace some joy. And if that means doing things in a different way to enjoy things I always had, then there's avenues for that. And expectations probably do have to adjust. I mean, I'm not going to go out and run an 8 or 9 minute per mile marathon. I'm not going to go shoot 72. I'm not going to play tennis, let's say, the way I used to, but I can still find ways to enjoy it. And even the adaptation is fun because it's like, okay, I'm learning this game in a new way or in a different way. And we're talking about games and sports, but there's probably metaphors for life in a larger way too. So I never really quit the game, but it was frustrating to, let's say, if we score, and that's one of the things I do with golf now, I don't keep score because it's not about that. And if I keep score, then it gets me too consumed with how I'm scoring, and I'd rather just go out and have fun and play. But I used to, of course, keep score. And when I was keeping score and Parkinson's arrived without me knowing it, I was shooting well over 100. And now if I scored, I'm well under 100. But I think adaptation and that means expectations too. It's like, why? It's good to, I think about why you're doing this. And for me, there is this quest for some joy, and playing is that, I think. That's great. What a great question. And the way I got there is you invited me. And that's what it takes sometimes, I mean, it takes an invitation from a friend. You're a close friend. You invited me. And when you didn't put the emphasis on the event so much itself, the running, the walking, what the course was going to be. You put it on the people that are going to be there. And that's why I enjoyed it. And I had hoped, and it played out that way, that I would get more out of the friendships and hopefully provide my own character with those friends than necessarily what we did on the course or the loops that we did. The loops were a ton of fun, and I learned a lot on the loops, particularly with Joyce, the first loop I did, to see her fall. We're in the dark and we're on the toughest loop, and to see her fall and get up. And she did that a couple times, and I gather many of us did. So that's a lesson, it's like, oh, wow, okay, we're walking with this disease, or we're running, or whatever we're doing. We're doing it in the darkness. We're doing it with a little light on our head. We fall, we get up. That was cool to be part of. That brought me to the swamp. The swamp. It was the hope for, to further friendships like with you and with Peter and with Joe, who I already knew, but there were 8 or 9 of us I didn't know. Never met them. We had a few Zoom sessions, but then I get to know other friends with the disease, and those friends I think are going to remain friends, and those friendships will develop and grow. That was the most beautiful thing of the weekend, which you encouraged, and you could see that, and I'm glad we had that time together. You know how we have these little kind of axioms or whatever you call them. Like for me, it's faith, family, and friends. I mean, medicine has a factor, exercise is a factor with the disease, but just life, whether you have the disease or not, to me, for me, I center it around faith in God, loving family and caring friends, and the 3 F's. And, those are, hopefully they're not a one-way street. Hopefully you're given yourself to those family and friends and to God, the way I see it. So you're not only on the take, you're on the give side of that. and they're huge. I mean, the faith thing is, some people don't really have faith in God, and if they have the disease and they don't have faith in God, well, they can still lean on family or they can still lean on friends. I kind of look at it as, okay, I do have faith in God, and I lean on that, or I lean on that being, if we can call God that. Family is incredibly important. My wife is understood this disease about as well as I have. She's lived with it, Terry, and the kids, and not everybody has that, so if you don't have that, and let's say you don't have faith, well, you still have friends. And for me, I'm very fortunate. I've got, I think, faith and family. I know I do, but friends are really important, and we all can have friends. Whether we have the faith thing, or even if we're left without much family near us, we can always have friends. And the friends in our community are ones that can relate to where we are. We know Parkinson's comes with different expressions. I'm fortunate mine's moving slowly, but I'm cognizant enough to know and have met enough people with Parkinson's that other people are in a more advanced place or in a more challenging place. And, and that brings in the gratitude thing. That's like, okay, we face these difficult hours or days or months or years, but what are we grateful for? Somehow, when you take something away, and Parkinson's definitely takes stuff away in our life, it makes you more grateful for some of the things that remain or deepen. And I've tried to think of it that way.
It seems like you have very little down. Is that fair? And if so, why?
Good question. Yeah, my parents always said I was hyperactive. They said, Mike, you got to slow down. Little did we know that it was Parkinson's that was going to come along and slow me down. And it does. I mean, we could say a lot about Parkinson's, but one of the overarching things I've discovered with this disease is it slows you down. It slows just about everything down. Um, and some, not that we want to be intentionally slowed down by a disease, but in some ways that's to be grateful for, because it enables you to pause a little bit and reflect. My days start with the gospel. When I wake up, and if I can't sleep, and most of us with Parkinson's have sleeping issues, I can pray. When I get up, I'm motivated to get up because I want to read what the gospel is that day and think about that. And the slow part of my day is probably the morning, and it's doing that. It's making breakfast. I get very habit oriented. Terry gets a kick out of it. I'm so predictable. And then I find ways to enjoy the day. And I'm very fortunate because we have enough financial security with the way we've been insured with this disease. And I don't take that for granted, because others with the disease who may have more financial insecurities, that creates a stressor that is not easy with this disease. So I'm fortunate that we're in a reasonably good financial place where that isn't stressful, and I can be retired now and I can enjoy some of the life, the joys that come with life. I do like to be active, and that's fortunate, I guess, with this disease, because we want to stay active, and that means, well, I do hope there's a cure. I do think about this, and this is more faith driven. I think we think about a cure, and I also think about healing. Cure is curing a biological disease. A healing, it really gets to the soul of a person, and that's deeper. But yeah, a cure would be great. I love what Michael J. Fox Foundation does. I love what our community does in support of discovering a cure, and then knowing that even where we have yet to discover a cure, therapies are being discovered that can help us better live with Parkinson's. Lifestyle adaptations are being learned about, like the importance of exercise and diet and other things. So as it relates to the Parkinson's community, I I want to be someone that encourages people, and look for people to encourage me within the community. And that goes back to what we just did this past weekend. I mean, to be with people that are not throwing the towel in, that are inspiring because of the way they live with the disease. That's good to be around. And then we, of course, encounter people that are having a difficult time, and you have to be careful there, because once again, the expression of the way we have the disease isn't the way that they necessarily have the disease. So kind of listening and being there for others, and recognizing that their shoes, even though we have the same disease, there's such variability around it. It's our experience isn't necessarily theirs. So I do want to be someone that advances, probably more than the cure thing, because there's a lot of attention on that, which is great, is how do you be a friend to people within the community that helps them kind of along with their lives, and helps me with mine. Well, what I've learned with the marathons is, it's very meaningful to me, these marathons, because the first time I detected I had something that we later understood was Parkinson's was when I did the 2011 New York City Marathon on my 50th birthday. And my story about that is, while I was training, I was getting weaker rather than stronger, and I knew something was up with that. And years later, we found out it was Parkinson's. And when not long after we moved to Chicago, not, I said to Terry, I said, well, I can't run. My gait got followed up on longer runs. So I said, I can't run a marathon, but I can walk them. And one reason that came about was how this whole thing started with that first marathon. And so I really enjoy them. I find I enjoy them most if I do them with other people. I got a chance to do 3 with my daughter, Anna. Peter's talking about doing one with me this next coming year. I did one with my cousin's daughter, Lauren, which was a joy, the Marine Corps, and got to do one with you and my neighbor, David. And David had a lot of resolve. He had a replacement knee, did a lot of training for it. And of course, we get on an 85-degree hot day and we're walking. So we're out there in the middle of the day, and he got dehydrated. And it was really meaningful to be shoulder to shoulder with David. He weighs a lot more than I did. So I propped him up the last quarter of a mile. But that's what those are about. It wasn't so much of, I mean, I enjoy it for me, just selfishly. I love doing those things because it's like, okay, it's a feat that I can still do, but it's more meaningful when you're doing it with somebody else. And you know how those marathons go as well as anybody. You sometimes meet people on the course, and you talk to them and you hear why they're doing a marathon, and the stories are inspiring, and maybe we'll inspire some people because we're doing it. But I think if you ask Terry that, or if you ask my parents that, um, I know I accept love from God, and I know I'm loved by my family. The thing I look at on that one is Parkinson's takes away a lot in our lives, but it doesn't take away the capacity to love one another. And so I don't know if it's help, but I do think about that. I say, okay, I'm loved. So I don't know if that's accepting help, but I'm definitely receptive to being loved. And and I hope I love others. That's, I strive to do that. So I think I probably look at that question more on the love prism rather than the help. But I think I'd love if you'd ask Terry that question, because I don't want to hear what you have to say. Well, I'll speak to some of the people I got to know and I hope to stay connected to. Rhonda taught us something. I've heard about Rhonda with her 100 marathons, and what a deeply kind of moved person she is. And, I remember asking her around our circle time, and I may ask some of the others, why do we run? Why do we do these things? And her answer, and I kind of anticipated that part of it was, we know, or we believe, that staying active like this slows the progression of the disease. But she also said she just enjoys the joy of running, which, the joy, I presume, of the feeling of it. And that really resonated with me, So, and the lesson she taught was, when you got a breakdown that's gonna, and who, for her doing 100 marathons, for her to be able to kind of shut it down because of a really serious health risk. I mean, that's a really good message, I think, for all of us. So that taught me a lot. Trisha, from Buffalo, I got to know her, and she was kind of seeking, I think, if I understand it right, more people in our Parkinson's community in a city that maybe isn't as populated with people with Parkinson's as, let's say, here in Chicago. So we talked about the buddy network, and I think she asked a good question: is there a geolocation on that buddy network? I don't think there is, but Stephanie Paddock maybe will do that. Sherry and Steve, from up there in northern Wisconsin and Lake Superior. Sherry's questing to do 50 half marathons and being a veteran. She now is going to get connected with Greg Brasso. They're going to talk about Veterans Voice, and he likes those Parkinson's stories because he knows the high prevalence of Parkinson's in veterans. There's a friendship that I hope grows. Jason, you talked about Jason and what he does up in Minneapolis, got to meet his parents and his son, and we're going to invite each other, or we already have, to our respective golf events. So those friendships are, I don't know if they're very different than friendships outside of Parkinson's, but they're genuine, and they come from a place where we understand each other, if for no other reason, but significantly because we have a disease in common. Well, I think I look at two big things. It's friendship development, not that it's a assignment development, but just friendship making. I mean, it's just such a beautiful thing. And we can be friends when we're not together in person. I think we've shown that through correspondence, through Zooms, through phone calls, and I think those are key. But the opportunity to get together in person at another event like this, I would jump for it. And then for the disease itself, and we've talked about this, I do have a problem with gait and the repetitive running or walking where it's somewhat mindless and you're a straight line, and usually in a marathon, you're kind of straight line running or walking. This trail running, we talked about, to me, it's like multivariable cognitive running. You have to decide where you're going to plant your feet just about every step, because you want to trip over a root or run into a rock or go up an incline or go sideways on a path. So the trail forces you to make adjustments, not every stride, but just multiple strides at a time. And it's been years since I've done any running or walking like that. And I came away without gait issues when I reflected on each of the loops I did, whereas I had just done 2 marathons in the previous 2 months, and I had gait issues in both marathons, but I didn't have them in that trail running. So that told me that there's something to that for, enjoying a walk or a run without being concerned about gait. It didn't come up. And I think it's the nature of that type of event. Well, coincidentally, our oldest son, Peter, is now in Colorado, and he's been running a lot. He enjoys it. And he said most of what he does is trail runs. And he reminded me that he and I did trail running with a good friend, Phil Gormley, and his son, Kean, back in New York on Bear Mountain 12, 15 years ago, before Parkinson's. And we were running most of those trails at pretty good speeds. And that reminded me, and it reminds him when he trail runs, of that time. But I hadn't done it since then. It had been 15 years, and it's a little bit like how I rediscovered sprinting with Chris Dell, and now, thanks to what we did in the swamps of Florida, I'm going to, with you, I hope, and others, look for trail running opportunities, because it's fun, and it does bring on a risk. I mean, so many of us fell at some point during that weekend. And, that's different than what Rhonda had. Rhonda had kind of life-threatening exhaustion, I think. But to fall and get up, like all of us did, or those that fell, is a lesson in itself. But so you got to balance it. I think, okay, we're going to risk a little bit of falling here, but the nature of the running is really good for us.
If you're talking to someone who's just diagnosed with Parkinson's and they're worried about their future and what that means, can you talk about how you would counsel them based on your own experience? It can be short, long, whatever. And then if you wouldn't mind just touching on, if you feel that your kind of openness and your drive to continue to find ways to do things has been important enough.
Yeah. I think for someone that's newly diagnosed, I mean, I think we all know, those of us that have movement disorder specialists on our side or in our care, we know the importance of them. So I would, that's not maybe where you were expecting me to answer, but I do want to emphasize that. I think somebody that's newly diagnosed needs someone with more specialty than just a general neurologist or a general physician. So what I almost always do, I hope I always do, is I encourage finding a movement disorder specialist for somebody that's newly diagnosed. I also encourage the importance of exercise and play in particular. Um, yeah, I think find your sources of strength, and for me, I mentioned faith, family, and friends. That may not be for everybody, but those are really the most critical sources of strength. People that love you, a God that loves you, if you want to go there. Um, and again, it's not a one-way street. It's who do you love too, and lean into that. I think is really, really key. I mean, we can talk about medicine, we can talk about alpha-synuclein, we can talk about dopamine, all that stuff's part of it. I mean, that's the pathology, or the treatment of it. But ultimately it's the people, I think, and so yeah, I think look for community if you're and some people aren't as social as you and I are. So I think it's recognizing that that's fine. People may be more private, but whether you're private or you're open about it, and I would encourage some openness because when you're open, you can find community more easily. But even if you're not, finding your sources of strength, and they may be what I mentioned, or they may be something else, but so as long as it's good for you, and I think intuitively we know what's good and bad for us, and I lean into what's good for us.